Good morning, everybody. Tanya, can you let me know if we have a quorum?
Yes, we definitely have a quorum.
All right. So, pardon the late start. We were coming over from the steering committee meeting. We ended a little late, but we will go ahead and start the April 16, 2021 St. Paul Planning Commission meeting. It's been determined that it's neither practical nor prudent for this commission and its committees to meet in person or pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.02. In light of the ongoing pandemic, it is not feasible for us to be present at our regular locations, and so members will be attending by telephone or other electronic means. We'll begin this meeting by taking a roll call. Sonia?
Okay, Commissioner Anderson?
Present.
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Here.
Commissioner Grill? Commissioner Hood?
Here.
Commissioner Holst?
Here.
Commissioner Kantner? Commissioner Kantner? Commissioner McMurtry?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell? Commissioner Moore?
Here.
Commissioner Perryman?
Here.
Commissioner Presley?
Here.
Commissioner Risberg?
Here.
Commissioner Said?
Here.
Commissioner Tagia?
Here.
Commissioner Thomas?
Here.
Commissioner Underwood?
Here.
Commissioner Yang?
Here.
And of course, the chair. That's
Here.
it.
So we will go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. It would be approval of the minutes of February 5th, 2021. It's my understanding this was sent out later than the rest of the agenda on April 14th. Is there a motion to approve?
This is Commissioner Grill. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Commissioner DeJoy, second.
All right, moved by Commissioner Grill, seconded by Commissioner DeJoy. Sonia, could we get a roll call?
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Aye.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman?
Yes.
Commissioner Presley?
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia?
Yes.
Commissioner Yang?
Yes.
Commissioner Holst?
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner? Must not be here. Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right, so that motion carries.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. Is this Mr. Risberg?
Yeah, it just wanted to note that I see in the chat that Commissioner Kantner is here. So she must be having trouble with her mic.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. So the next item on the agenda is, I don't have any new announcements other than we just met at the steering committee and we'll be ready to present on essentially what we've been talking about for the last 2.5 months for the full commission's education. I guess it's more of an educational presentation by Mr. Warner. So I hope if there's any questions, we can have a good dialogue about it and get to the bottom of any ongoing issues with regards to planning commission authorities. I'll move it on to the next item of the agenda, which is Director Pereira's announcements.
Good morning, commissioners and members of the public and staff. I just have one announcement. We had the first of 2 parking study webinars or informational sessions last night related to the parking study to amend the zoning code parking regulations. We had 170 attendees sign up for the 2 webinars that we're holding before the public hearing on April 30th here at the Planning Commission. And 32 people attended last night's session. We answered 20 different questions posed by members, attendees in the virtual meeting. And again, the purpose of these informational sessions are to provide an overview of the proposed amendments to parking regulations in St. Paul. There will be time to pose questions. There is time to pose questions using the question and answer function in the meeting. And the second of the 2 virtual sessions is coming up Tuesday, April 20th from 12 noon to 1 p.m. In addition to these 2 sessions, staff has also offered to present, as you have requested, 2 district councils and has attended the Southeast Community Organization, which is District 1, on April 5th. We also have talked to the Highland Business Association on April 8th upon their request, as well as the Mac-Groveland Community Council, District 14 is coming up on April 28th. We're going to be reaching back out to the district councils when we have last night's recording up on our website for sharing that out. In addition to that, the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce is going to be hosting us on Monday, April 19th from 3 to 4 p.m. They're holding a issue forum. And so we're essentially going to provide similar information to them as the webinars. So one last reminder, if you're interested or want to share this out with folks our second webinar is Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. The sign up is on the parking website, and to sign up, you'll just complete a web form, a few questions, and then you'll get a link to join the webinar. And then if folks have general questions about the study, they can email a separate email address we have, parkingstudy@ci.stpaul.mn.us. So I'll put this into the chat so you have the information for the upcoming one. That's the entirety of my announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. So the next item on the agenda, any questions for Director Pereira? All right, seeing none. The next item on the agenda is Zoning Committee. Commissioner Baker.
Thanks, Chair. There are 2 agenda items for the upcoming site plan review meeting scheduled for April 20th. St. John Vianney College Seminary at 2110 Selby Avenue and an institutional addition, and Selby Dale Apartments at 594 Selby Avenue, which is new residential. For the upcoming zoning committee meeting, there are 4 new items. 444 Maryland Avenue West, rezoning from B1 Local Business District to T2 Traditional Neighborhood. 385 Topping Street, rezoning from B1 Local Business to T2 Traditional Neighborhood. And then 2 from 300 Banfield Street. The first is a rezoning from B2 Community Business to RM2 Medium Density Multi-Family Residential. And then variances for front yard setback, rear yard setback, south side setback, and north side yard setback. For the April 8th zoning committee meeting, we had just one item. 1053 Dale Street North. It was a rezoning from R4 one family residential to T2 traditional neighborhood. The building was constructed in 1962 as a commercial structure. In 1999, a permit was issued for nonconforming use of the building for business and or professional offices. And the building has been in continuous commercial use since that time. The applicant is seeking to rezone the property to potentially convert a portion of the property for use as a general retail or residential use. The applicant highlighted that the current designation should have been changed earlier on with previous owners, and that he's just finally making the change and doing the work. The District Council 10 did submit a letter recommending approval of the application. There was no one that spoke in support or opposition of the application during the public hearing. However, the applicant did restate, so to speak, his support of the project during the public hearing. There were 2 letters of support and 1 letter of opposition for the application. All findings were met for this application, and staff recommended approval to rezone 1053 Dale Street North from R4 one family residential to T2 traditional neighborhood. The zoning committee voted 7-0 in favor of the application, with 1 member abstaining.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Baker, and I was the member that abstained from that vote. So, but I will not vote on it this time. But the motion coming out of committee was to approve. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Sonia, could we get a roll call?
Okay, Commissioner Presley?
Did you call my name?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
I'm mixing it up a little bit. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson? Yes. Commissioner Risberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry?
Yes.
Commissioner Yang?
Yes.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner Joy?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagioff?
Yes.
Commissioner Holt?
Yes.
Commissioner Cantner?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Unanimous.
So the 1053 Dale rezoning motion does pass. Commissioner Baker?
Thanks, Chair. Those were the only items we had. And just to highlight for everyone, there was a postponement on 444 Maryland rezoning, and that, as I said earlier, will move forward on our April 22nd zoning committee meeting. And that's it for zoning committee report.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. The next item on the agenda is the Planning Commission's authorities. This will be a presentation and by our attorneys, Peter Warner, and our director. Before they give the presentation, I just wanted to give a brief procedural context to how we got to this presentation. So over the course of several years, I think the numerous members of the committee have been asking for a better understanding of what and how commissioners can uh, encourage development of affordable housing in the city. We have been given, for those sitting in the zoning committee, we have been given presentations, and we have advanced issues of trying to do some form of an equity scorecard and or questions in advance of developers, so that when they do get to the zoning committee level, they're not thrown back by some of the questions that commissioners ask. I think it ultimately culminated with a recent application that came before us, in which I think commissioners felt their hands were tied, or some commissioners did. And so I think this presentation will be helpful in navigating this conflict that we've sort of run into, and put us in a better position to address the situation with regards to housing that's affordable going forward. That's essentially what triggered this application, but I think the presentation, but I think the presentation will be helpful in just generally understanding what it is that we are actually authorized to do, what our role as a commission is, when do we serve as an advisory body, and simply as an advisory body, and when do we serve in a more quasi-judicial manner. And so I'll leave it to Mr. Warner and Director Pereira to give us this information.
Sounds good. Chair, our city attorney's office counsel, Peter Warner, will present the majority of this. I am going to be advancing slides, so let me know if you can see. If you can't see this, it should be showing on the screen. And then towards the end of this, there's a kind of a flow chart that tries to summarize a lot of the legal language you're going to see on the individual slides, that hopefully we can land on and maybe do Q&A. That's at least how I thought this could go, if that works.
Go ahead.
Okay. Peter?
Thanks, Luis. Good morning, commissioners. Hope everybody's having a good day thus far. I apologize. I seem to have inherited a spring cold. I just apologize for my voice. And if I pause, it's because I'm sneezing. So, Luis, put together a nice slide presentation. I filled in most of the legalese, and the presentation today kind of goes along with what the chair had talked about, and I think it's useful because there are a lot of new members. And the one thing that I think at a staff level we've talked about the need to sort of, for lack of a better term, sort of re-up the educational portion of your duties on the commission, just to provide some more information. I think with COVID in the last year, we've just kind of we haven't had the luxury of seeing one another in person where you can talk about things informally, and so I think as things return to a more normative state, we're going to try to do a little bit more education and make ourselves more available for answering questions. So with that in mind, the presentation today is on the powers of the Planning Commission, and really what it is where do those powers come from? And so as the slide says, get ready for a little bit of legalese. It's very dry, but this presentation should inform you as to where and why the Planning Commission exists. So, like everything, municipalities are creatures of state. In other words, the state government allows municipalities to exist. And when it comes to zoning, municipalities exercise their zoning authority pursuant to the Municipal Planning Act. So there is a delegation from the state legislature to a municipality that allows them to engage in zoning, which is my way of saying cities don't get to zone, cities are permitted to zone, and they're permitted to do so by the state. And so here's a couple of cases that talk about the delegation of that authority, and it's delegated via a legislative enabling act. So Luis, next slide, please. So the delegation, if you remember, when you first came on board, we had sort of a little planning and zoning 101, and there was discussion of the Municipal Planning Act. And the Municipal Planning Act is the state law that allows municipalities to engage in zoning. So it's codified at Minnesota Statute 462351 through 365. And just like municipalities, other governmental organizational types in the state are also given authority to engage in zoning. So there's a planning act that applies to counties, and there's also a planning act that applies to townships. So in other words, whether you're a city, a county, a township, you engage in zoning based on the enabling act and the powers that are given to you through that enabling act. So next slide, please. So what does the Municipal Planning Act delegate? Well, it says in the purpose statement that it provides municipalities in a single body of law with the necessary powers and uniform procedures for adequately conducting and implementing municipal planning. So the takeaway that the Planning Act gives you is that's the delegation of powers. So that's the source that allows municipalities to engage in land use. It defines the procedures that have to be followed to implement the land use plans. But it also serves then, because it's the single source of that law, it also restricts what those delegated powers are. So whatever the powers that are in the single body of law, those are the powers that municipalities use to engage in zoning. So next slide. So when you look at the Municipal Planning Act, the Municipal Planning Act provides for the creation of a planning commission. So when you look at the Planning Act, it says a municipality may by charter or ordinance create a planning agency. And then it goes on to say the planning agency created by ordinance may be abolished by 2/3 of all the members of the governing body. Planning agency shall be advisory except as other powers and duties that are imposed under the Planning Act by statute or by charter or by ordinance consistent with the municipal charter. And then it goes on to say the planning agency can take 2 alternate forms. So again, the law is telling you how you put these planning agencies together. So next slide.
And Peter, just to jump in, this is Luis. I would just to underline governing body. That's the city council. It might be sort of self-evident, but I had a doubt when I saw that phrase. So just throw that out there.
Yep. Sorry, governing body, city council. So if you think about, so the Planning Act allows planning agency to take one of 2 forms. There's alternate form number 1, where it says it may consist of a planning commission which may or may not include municipal officials amongst its members, and also gives it a delegation about staff, and says that it's advisory to the governing body, again to the city council. And then the second slide, which as a second form, so again, that statute, subdivision 1(2), says that the planning agency may consist of a planning department with a planning commission advisory to it and shall function as a department advisory to the governing body, the municipal administration, and that a planning department may be provided with an executive director and other staff, as in the case of other municipal departments. And so with those 2 choices, St. Paul has elected to follow alternate form number 2. So under the Planning Act, that's the choice that we were given. That's the choice the city has followed. But remember that the Municipal Planning Act also states that a municipality may by charter or ordinance create a planning agency under that particular delegation. So in order to create the planning agency under Minnesota Statute 462354, the municipality has to enact a charter provision or an ordinance to create its planning agency. And so St. Paul has done that. So when you, so sort of a brief background here. So when you look at the St. Paul Book of Ordinances, there's basically 3 chapters. There's the city charter, there's the legislative code, and there's the administrative code. So the legislative code is where you find the zoning ordinance. And basically the legislative code is a series of ordinances that are in essence rules, regulations, and laws. The administrative code, if you will, is basically the blueprint for how the city operates. So if you go back to the city charter says any ordinance that you need an ordinance to establish a department, and it has to be codified under the city's administrative code. So the planning agency is a department of the city. So for the under the Municipal Planning Act, in order for the planning agency to have teeth, and in conjunction with the St. Paul City Charter, there has to be an administrative ordinance. And so if you look at the administrative code under section 10.01, you'll see that there's a document entitled Department Established. And there, like the slide says, there's a Department of Planning and Economic Development established. And it sort of delineates how that department is put together. There's a director. And it also says within that department, there are going to be several different divisions. And of course, for our purposes, the division that we're interested in is the Division of Planning and Design. So you got to look at the whole thing on a continuum. So you've got the Municipal Planning Act that says how you engage, like allows us to engage in zoning. Within the Planning Act, it says here's how you put together your administrative processes to engage in zoning. You look at the city charter, which says if you're going to have a planning agency, you have to have an administrative ordinance that allows that. There's an administrative ordinance that's been adopted, and within that administrative ordinance, it delineates how the Department of Planning works and how it functions. So with that background, then you next go to administrative codes. Oops, if you go back, please. So 10.01 establishes this Division of Planning and Design. So let's go to the next slide then. Thank you. So within that same section, chapter 10, section 10.04, you remember it talked about a division of planning and design. And so keeping in mind that under the direction of the department director, the Division of Planning and Design administers Minnesota statutory requirements, the Land Planning Act, and city ordinances regarding the comprehensive plan. It evaluates and updates comprehensive plan elements, and it provides staff support to the city's planning commission. So there's kind of the first language that describes there's a planning commission. So, all right, well, how do we get to the planning commission? So we'll get to that. So also within Administrative Code section 10.04, there's further instructions, and it says the staff in the planning division, they administer the legal requirements of the city zoning ordinance. They provide technical reviews. They provide staff support to the zoning committee, the planning commission, and the Board of Zoning Appeals. So there's the delineation within the city's administrative code as to how Luis appears in front of you, how all the staff members that from the planning department appear in front of you. It's because there is a specific paragraph in the city's administrative code that says this is what these folks do. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so again, the Planning Act says you can have a planning agency. The planning agency says it can take a particular form. The city's elected a particular form. There's a city administrative ordinance that creates a planning department. Within the planning department, there's another city ordinance that says that there's a Department of Planning and Design, and they do zoning stuff, and they provide staff to the Planning Commission. So again, how is there a planning commission? So let's go to the next slide. So to get to the Planning Commission, you have to go back. You look at the Enabling Act under the Municipal Planning Act, and it says, as enabled therein, the city enacted an ordinance which created a planning agency in the form of a planning department with a planning commission advisory to it, which shall function as a department advisory to the governing body in the municipal administration. Okay, so again, that's sort of the basis for the law. You also have to look at the city charter. City charter says you have to have an administrative ordinance to establish a department, office, or agency of the city. So again, there's a legal framework, or basically a stairway, that gets us to how we have a planning commission. So let's go to the next slide. So again, in the administrative code, there's another chapter under 107 that talks about the planning commission. And section 107.01 of that chapter 107 that talks about the planning commission, there's how the planning commission is created. There's hereby created an advisory planning commission. The commission shall consist of 21 voting members appointed by the mayor with the consent of the council. So the powers, the power to establish the planning commission flows from the Municipal Planning Act, flows from the statutory process and how that's enacted. And we get to the administrative code, which our city charter requires us to establish departments and agencies. And so that's how there is the St. Paul Planning Commission as a legal entity. So next slide. So like everything else, there's a source of authority. So here are the various powers and duties of the Planning Commission. So 107.02 says that the commission serves as an advisory body to the mayor and city council on municipal planning matters as required by the Municipal Planning Act and the Metropolitan Land Use Planning Act. So in particular, it says that the Planning Commission reviews and comments on comprehensive plan recommendations. And it can also recommend to the mayor initiation of such planning studies as it deems necessary for the proper preparation of a comprehensive plan or any portion thereof. So there is an express set of duties that have been created and defined with respect to comprehensive planning. Next slide, please. But there's more. So also in the administrative code under the duties of the Planning Commission, there's also created a zoning committee. So the language in that ordinance says there's hereby created a zoning committee. It has 8 people. It's comprised of members of the Planning Commission. And that committee serves as an advisory body to the Planning Commission on matters related to the St. Paul zoning code. And then it goes on to say the committee shall, upon proper notification, conduct public hearings and other matters. But that's why we have the zoning committee. The zoning committee has been delegated with the authority to conduct the public hearings on zoning related matters. And the zoning committee is advisory to the full planning commission. So that's why on your meetings on Friday, you get this presentation from the chair of the zoning committee on the actions and recommendations of the zoning committee. So let's go to the next slide. There's also more additional powers and duties. So under Legislative Code 61202, so remember the administrative code sort of defines what the roles and duties are, and it creates city departments, city agencies. There's also the legislative code. Those are the rules, the regulations, the laws with respect to the zoning code. And again, we have legislative codes. We have the zoning code because of the Municipal Planning Act. So the Municipal Planning Act has a section that says you can establish zoning ordinances. And the city has done that through the creation of the various chapters in the legislative code that are devoted to zoning, which is basically chapters 60 to 69. So under the zoning code, you have additional duties that are defined. So if you look at A, it says the commission reviews and approves site plans, conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, similar use determinations, and other matters provided in this code. It can grant variances in certain circumstances. And it can also delegate some of its powers to have administrative reviews. So again, this is how the commission acts when it reviews a conditional use permit or a site plan or a non-conforming use permit. It's because of this particular specific delegation of that authority. So let's go to the next slide, please. And there's even more powers, and this is perhaps the slide that the next series of slides are probably of the most interest. So under Minnesota Statute 462357 subdivision 4, that's within the Municipal Planning Act, it says an amendment to a zoning ordinance may be initiated by the planning agency. And remember, you've got to go back and look at all these rules and read them all together. So if you go back to Minnesota Statute 462357 subdivision 3, that section defines a planning agency as the planning commission or the planning department of a municipality. So the planning commission can initiate zoning ordinances changes. The planning department can initiate zoning ordinances and changes to those zoning ordinances. So that's a very important description of the powers of the planning commission. Go ahead,
Peter. I hate to interrupt, but this is important. It's a little confusing, maybe, and I know Chair, you had some questions about this as we were developing it. Is the planning agency the planning department? Is it the planning commission? The statutes and the ordinances that we have taken together, as you said, Peter, would suggest that both of these entities, commission and department, sort of can be interpreted as the planning agency. That's a little bit complicated to think about, but in a practical sense, though, planning department, we, PED, planning division, we would as staff bring study, amendments to the zoning ordinance and initiate them by bringing them to the planning commission. That's typically how we've done it to consider that. So anyway, for what that's worth, that's what that looks like in my mind.
Yeah, and I think the important takeaway there is it really does mean both the way the city has put together its planning commission. So and I want to underscore that I read that sentence to say that both the planning commission and city staff can initiate a zoning ordinance or a zoning ordinance change. Next slide, please. So I think that if there's a takeaway here, it's this: on comprehensive planning matters, the commission is advisory. On quasi-judicial matters like zoning applications, site plans, conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, the planning agency, the planning commission, their decisions are final. If they're not appealed, because the zoning code also allows for appeals. So your decisions generally are final. And that legislative decisions, so if you're going to amend the zoning code or propose a zoning code amendment or propose a new zoning ordinance, that those are legislative matters and they're advisory to the city council and to the mayor. So it's up to them to decide whether or not to move forward with them. And then finally, going back to the administrative code, I guess for lack of a better term, the resources of the city are not infinite, and the city has to function. And so the city has set up this Department of Planning and Economic Development. It's got a director. The director supervises the staff and engages in how that staff is allocated. So there's a duty under the ordinance to supply staff, but that supply of staff time and resources is not unlimited. And so it's my way of saying that there has to be a recognized balance. So when there's work to be done, as you know, as staff, puts together a work plan, they present it to you, and staff, I'm assuming, is creating those work plans based on a reasonable assessment of what resources are available to the staff. So I hope that at least you understand the underpinnings of how the Planning Commission came to be, how it functions, what its duties are, what its powers are. It's all prescribed. It's none of this. I always tell lawyers are always looking for things to do for their clients when they ask something. And my comment always is, what is the source of your authority? Where does the authority for you to engage in something come from? Look for find a statute, find an ordinance. Where does it say that you can do this? And so this little presentation is sort of to lay out the foundations of how the Planning Commission came to be, what its powers and duties are, and how they're prescribed within the city administrative code, the city zoning code, all of which flow from the Municipal Planning Act. So with that, Luis has kind of put together this flow chart that I hope will summarize this kind of boring legalese, but I'll let Luis sort of go through this flow chart. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I can just kind of verbally summarize this. It's pretty much trying to kind of recap everything that Peter said. And there's sort of this question about duties and authorities. Staff, Planning Commission, we don't have on this slide, it's the City Council, but there's a role there as well as the mayor. But at least in terms of the staff, the Planning Division, and the Planning Commission, starting with that Municipal Planning Act authorizes the city to have one of two forms of planning agency that's advisory. We selected this alternate form 2, where we have a planning department and we do have a planning commission that's advisory to the mayor's office, essentially the municipal administration, and the city council. It looks like city council got cut off there in that box. That's that middle black box is what we follow in St. Paul. Then we have our city administrative ordinance, again, that creates our planning department, planning and economic development department, with a planning division within it. We have a PED director, Director Nicole Goodman. We have the division of planning and design. We just call ourselves the planning team. And the duties that flow from that are over there on the bottom right. And then the actual kind of distinction about sort of two buckets that I see: the Planning Commission advisory roles and the Planning Commission kind of decision-making roles. And so there you can see a lot of the similar text that was on the previous slides. The advisory part about comprehensive plan recommendations, and recommending to the mayor the initiation of planning studies that relate to the comp plan effectively. On the decision-making side of it, it's really more thinking about again, the zoning cases, the quasi-judicial decisions like conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, when there are variances that accompany those. Interestingly, we don't put rezonings are a little bit different than say the other types of zoning cases, because the commission is not the final decision maker on that. They're advisory to the city council. So that doesn't show up here on this slide, but just an interesting twist. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. And again, at the very bottom, there's a note that I added, again, quoting the statute that says an amendment to a zoning ordinance can be initiated by the governing body. So that's the city council, the planning agency. So that would be, again, planning commission and or PED, planning department, or by petition of affected property owners as defined in the zoning ordinance. So those are kind of the three ways that we can have an amendment to the zoning ordinance kind of beginning or initiating. So that's basically what I had, and I will see if folks have questions. We can we're happy to jump to any slide if there's something in particular that caught your attention you wanted to ask follow-up questions about, or anything that was confusing. Feel free to jump in and ask us. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you, Peter. So that was a lot of information to take in, and so I want to make sure that the commissioners have an understanding and have all their questions answered about the application. So I'll call on Commissioner McMurtry first, and then if anyone else has any questions, please raise your hand.
Thanks, Chair. This is extremely helpful. I thank you all for putting this together. Had one quick question slash a recommendation. I believe it's on slide 20 that goes through the different. Yeah, that one right there. Could you provide, add to this slide, and I'm assuming we'll all get access to this presentation, examples of quasi-judicial versus legislative? I know you mentioned for quasi-judicial, it would be kind of those conditional use permitting, but just having those examples there will just help, at least me, will help me understand what are certain examples that would qualify under quasi-judicial versus legislative decisions.
Sure, I think that's a great point, and yeah, we can easily add those.
Awesome, thank you.
A good way of remembering it, Commissioner McMurtry, that really helped me is anything heard in zoning committee, you could assume will be quasi-judicial. Is that a fair summary, Peter?
Chair, yes, it is. The only exception to that would be rezonings. Those are legislative. They are heard by the zoning committee, but the vast majority of things that the commission receives reports on from the zoning committee chair on Friday mornings are with respect to applications, are quasi-judicial matters.
And in the same vein, almost everything that comes out of the comp plan, neighborhood planning, tends to be legislative. Would that be also a fair summary?
I think so, yes.
Thank you, Peter. Commissioner Perryman?
Yeah, I guess I want some clarification on the use of the comprehensive plan. I know we've talked about it, yeah, with our last situation, but a couple weeks ago it was brought up with conditions where the conditions were directly referring to the comprehensive plan that people had to follow. So I'm wondering when the comprehensive plan is utilized and when it is just a sort of suggested guiding document.
Well, again, when the comprehensive plan comes into play is when you look at the standards that are adopted in the zoning code. For instance, with a conditional use permit, there's a section in there that talks about whether or not the application is in substantial compliance with the comprehensive plan. So that's when you look to see if comprehensive plan elements are part of the evaluation of an application. And I think, and I'm just going to wing it here, with non-conforming use permits, I don't think there's any reference to the comprehensive plan, or is there? I think I'll defer to staff on that one. I just don't know off the top of my head. But you always look at whatever the underlying standards are to be applied. That's sort of your guide as to when a particular plan comes into play.
I think Commissioner Peter, if I can restate Commissioner Perryman's, if I'm understanding it correctly, is the comp plan serving as the sole reason for denial or approval of an application?
Well, my legal advice continues to be the comprehensive plan standing alone. If that's the only thing that you have, my legal advice is that is not a strong basis on which to approve or deny an application, because by definition, comprehensive plans are meant to be visionary documents, and the Metropolitan Planning Act specifically says, at some section that I don't have at my fingertips, but I'll paraphrase it, it says you activate the comprehensive plan by adopting official controls. And official control includes zoning ordinances. So the comprehensive plan, in its base terms with respect to certain types of applications, is not a regulatory tool. In other types of applications, it could be, but as a general rule, you generally need something more than just the comprehensive plan to form a factual basis for your underlying decision.
Thank you, Peter. Director Pereira, and then Commissioner Talia.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And to something that Peter said, the way that just sort of to add additional information, the question about do zoning cases, or what items have to be consistent or found? Is there a comp plan kind of consistency finding that needs to be made? My understanding of it is basically all of these sorts of zoning cases, rezonings, conditional use permits, non-conforming use permits, they all have a finding that relates back to the comp plan. It's all stated slightly differently if you look at it in the code, but for all intents and purposes, like, you can assume that we're going to be looking at the comp plan when we're evaluating those cases. And again, the language is it varies a little bit. And it's something that we've looked at with and looking at our draft equity worksheet for the zoning applications that we're still trying to get back to you, to the zoning committee. The decision, I think, was guidance was provided by the zoning committee that let's go ahead and apply this to pretty much all types of cases, large and small. And so, like, the burden is to ensure that it's not a burden on all of these applications, but that is kind of a common denominator, that the comp plan is in effect. And so our connection between the comp plan and equity was made. And so, yes, the comp plan is a factor in the decision made by the recommendation made by the zoning committee. And yes, the comp plan talks a lot about equity. And so how do we unpack that a little bit more deeply? What does that mean? What are the different dimensions of equitable development, and so on and so forth? So probably a little bit more words than I wanted to say at this point, but like, the original point was the comp plan matters in pretty much all of these decisions.
Commissioner Talia.
Yes, I've been struggling with that same balance between the comprehensive plan and other conditions. I note that section 61.402, for example, regarding site plan review by the Planning Commission, subsection C lists out 11 criteria in total, of which it says the Planning Commission shall consider and find that the site plan is consistent with the city's adopted comprehensive plan, and the other things of the 11. So what I'm struggling to do is to reconcile the kind of the sort of stated conflict between Mr. Warner's assertion that the comprehensive plan really isn't an official control and therefore visionary, etc., and the text of the zoning code, which really seems to suggest that a finding of consistency shall be made. In some cases, we've been discussing things in the zoning committee, it seems like that first criterion is sometimes weighed as the overall or the sort of overriding factor in favor of approving an application. If, for example, we think that it includes affordable housing or otherwise is consistent with the city's goals, but then in a denial, we're told that it shouldn't have any effect really and should be sort of discarded. It's almost sort of why does that first criterion exist? If any other criterion can be the sole reason for a denial, why can't one? So I'm looking to sort of balance and reconcile those two things, because I'm just very confused as to as to how those two statements can both be true. That the comprehensive plan cannot have an effect as a visionary document, but the zoning code often requires us to find consistency with the site plan as something that is legislative control?
Well, I think first of all, I think it's I don't see a conflict at all, and I I'm going to disagree with your characterization of my legal advice. But I will say this, that the comprehensive plan, especially in the metropolitan area, that's the principal guiding document for how municipalities move forward with zoning and planning. And when you have these different standards for different types of applications, when it's looking for consistency with the comp plan, you can open up the comp plan and find phrases that will make an application consistent with it. You could probably open up the comp plan and find phrases within the comp plan that would suggest that there's an inconsistency. And when you use the word strike the balance, I think that's the key. And when staff drafts their reports, they're looking at the comprehensive plan, they're giving you their professional opinion on whether or not this particular application is consistent with the comprehensive plan or not consistent with the comprehensive plan, and they will cite particular goals and policies within the comprehensive plan to support their recommendation. And again, you're looking for consistency. And with respect to these various applications, there's 10, 11, 12 standards for each type of application you review. And the reference to the comprehensive plan is just one of 10. So I don't think there's an inconsistency in the analysis. It is, what is the balance between what's called for in the comprehensive plan and how does the particular application meet those particular standards that are contained in the comp plan. So I guess it's confusing, but that's why you have staff to make recommendations to you on whether or not an application is generally consistent with whatever that application is proposing to do and segments of the comprehensive plan. I don't know how to answer it any better than that, other than to say it's the comprehensive plan in and of itself is a guiding document.
Thank
Any
you, Mr. Warner. I
additional
appreciate that.
any additional questions for Mr. Warner? I think those have been really good questions that have been asked, and so there is no wrong question. This is really confusing. This is really confusing in general. So if you do have a question, please feel free to ask it, and now is the time. Commissioner Grill.
Hi, Chair. This is something that I've always dealt with, I think, and I still get confused about. So I'm wondering if it's something that new folks might as well. So when we talk about the differences between legislative and quasi-judicial, the differences between what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So as far as speaking about the case with people, some of those other things, I'm just wondering if there's like a really high level, and I'm sure that's difficult to ask, but summary of when those cases, when you're dealing with a quasi-judicial case, what are we allowed to do and not allowed to do?
Luis, I can take a stab at that. So remember that legislative actions are things like proposing new ordinances or amending ordinances, and legislative actions are basically policy decisions. And you can talk to anybody and anybody can talk to you at any time during the course of your review and consideration of a legislative decision, because those decisions are all encompassing. They're applicable to everyone in the city that's subject to the zoning code. Quasi-judicial decisions are different because there you're applying a set of standards that have been adopted in the zoning code to a particular applicant. And so in those matters, in quasi-judicial matters, you have to make a decision, and your decision has to be based on the application of the standards that are in the zoning code, and it has to be based on the facts that are presented to you during the course of the review of the application. And so it's not something that you can take information from people outside of the public hearing process or outside of the staff review process when they prepare the report. You are to make those decisions based on the record that's before you, and because of the open meeting law, you have to make those decisions based on the record that's before you, that's presented during a public hearing process. So in quasi-judicial matters, you should not be talking to people outside of the public hearing process. You shouldn't be taking evidence from your neighbor when you're shoveling your sidewalk and they have a strong opinion about something. So I don't want this this conversation to get into the public meeting, open meeting law process, because that we could spend hours talking about that. But just as sort of at the 30,000 foot level, that's the distinction between the two. Quasi-judicial matters, you're applying facts to a particular applicant's application. Legislative matters, you're applying, you're making a policy decision, and on those matters, the door is open to talk to people. Quasi-judicial matters, the door is open when you're at the public hearing process and you're taking and receiving testimony. So I hope that kind of answers it at the 30,000 foot level.
Yes, thank you.
Any additional questions? All right. So I want to bring it back to the duties and authorities presentation and sort of summarize what the discussions have been at the steering committee meeting for all the commissioners to be aware of, and sort of the next steps or proposals that we could do. So essentially, I believe Commissioner Tagiov's question was a good transition into what the discussions at steering have been, which is we have this ongoing conflict at the commission with regards to how can the city meet its need for this shortage of housing while at the same time respecting the population that currently exists today. And another way of saying it is, how do we prevent displacement? How do we take care of all of St. Paul community members so that St. Paul is a livable city for all? And an ongoing concern that has typically popped up is the standard that is used for affordability is the area median income. And what does that mean? Whether or not that's an appropriate standard is a different question. But is there a way of encouraging developers to sort of incorporate housing that's affordable within developments themselves? When is the commission authorized to make a condition on it? When are they not? And so we've had this conflict, and I think for those that have been in the commission, at least since before February, we know what we're talking. You know what I'm referencing to. For the newer commissioners that came on in February or afterwards, you know, I think it's going to be an issue that is going to be ongoing, and so that's why we've had this discussion, because I believe someone's not muted. So the question that we've been asking, what are our tools? What can we do? And one thing that has come up was doing what's known as the inclusionary zoning study, which is actually a zoning ordinance, or the pursuit of a zoning ordinance that is employed in various other cities around the Twin Cities, but not by St. Paul. And that would serve, you know, depending on what that study finds, it would tell us whether that is an appropriate tool for building affordable housing in St. Paul or not. And if it was, it could serve as a way of, you know, this conflict between when can you include it as a condition and not. It could hopefully serve as a bridge to put some teeth behind you know, regulation. So with that said, staff has worked with the steering committee in developing a resolution. And this resolution essentially came about because at the February 5th meeting, we received a presentation of what city staff was going to be working on in 2021. And the inclusionary zoning study was not a priority in that list of things. I don't even think it was listed as something that was going to be touched on in 2021. And so that started the conversation about, well, do we as a commission have the authority to ask staff to reprioritize that list or to include things into that list? And what I'm hearing from Mr. Warner and from staff is that we have the authority to recommend the initiation of a study, but that recommendation is limited by resources of staff and funding. And that is ultimately determined by the, I guess, the director of planning and economic development and by the mayor. Is that all correct, Mr. Warner?
Yes.
Okay. And so what I want to do, or not want to do, but I want to make sure that this meeting is today, is that we're clear on if the body of this commission has changed drastically since February 5th. I think we have 8 or 9 new commissioners. A lot of the commissioners that had these concerns have since left. I know a lot of commissioners who are still present have this concern, but I don't know what the appetite of the current makeup of the commission is to ask the city to prioritize an inclusionary zoning study for 2021, possibly 2022, and understanding that our initiation of passing this resolution is limited by staffing and by resources. So I just don't want, what I have been telling Director Pedeta is, I don't want to give the impression that we have the authority to override individuals that have the say in this. But I do think that by passing this resolution, we signal essentially that we foresee this issue ongoing, that we foresee this conflict continuing to arise in further discussions, and that we're really asking to work together to find a way to solve this problem, both within the commission, but also for our fellow community members, that this is a priority. So I would like to open up the floor to just hear comments from commissioners about whether they feel they want time to think about this motion. I know it was just sent last night. To think about it, or whether commissioners would feel that it's appropriate to bring it up now, vote on it, send it on. If it was to be voted and approved, we do have a letter by the steering committee essentially summarizing in a better way than I just did my comments here in the last 5 minutes. But I am curious about where, especially the new commissioners, lie on this particular issue, or if you would want more time to think about it. Commissioner Hood.
Thank you, Chair. This is something that I support and I think is long overdue, and something that I'm comfortable voting on either today or at the next Planning Commission meeting. I think it's a step in the right direction and something that I want to see move forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Kantner and then Commissioner Moore.
Yeah, I would just ask, as the new commissioner, it might be helpful to see what the other priorities that were presented earlier that were included in the work plan. And also, if there's some way to kind of see a comprehensive overview of all the affordable housing strategies that the city is currently pursuing or working on. Because I know inclusionary zoning is certainly a piece of the puzzle, but not, like a silver bullet. So just hoping maybe those could be sent out.
Luis.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Kantner, thank you for that comment or question. We do have our 2021 work program, at least for the planning division, on the website. I will forward that out. It's always something we bring to the commission early in the year for awareness. So we did do that on February 5th. So that will give you a sense of like what specifically are we working on this year. And then the other part around sort of overview of affordable housing kind of strategies, programs, what we're doing more holistically. A couple points. There's a presentation we gave last year about sort of affordable housing, finance, sort of policy considerations, etc. We had our housing director, Kayla Shuckman, come and talk about the Housing Trust Fund. And Peter and I talked a bit about sort of the regulatory framework and legal framework. That we can reshare because I think it has probably some of that. But then more recently, Director Shuckman has presented on a variety of different affordable housing strategies, and I can try to find that and share that out.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tagia.
Yes, following on from that, so this same discussion came up at City Council in relation to APC 21-1, and I believe the City Council members also were quite in favor of initiating the inclusionary zoning study. In response to that, Director Goodman said something that caught my attention. She sort of talked about, well, yes, the inclusionary zoning is one thing, but there are a range of other things that PED would like to do. So I suppose my question for Director Pereira is this the most helpful thing that the next step that we could take as a planning department and city in this direction, or are there other things we should also be considering?
Chair and Commissioner Tagioff, I believe this is a helpful step insofar as it directly relates to the the commission's role in terms of supporting zoning study of the zoning code, reviewing and recommending amendments to the zoning ordinance, and I think to your point about the presentation Director Goodman gave to the City Council, there were a number of other things on the list there that everything from additional use of community land trusts in homeownership contexts to study of the use of slightly different use of TIF or TIF tax increment financing or property tax programs that could be property tax mitigation sort of programs that could be applied to support anti-displacement. Some of those things are I'd say probably beyond the scope of the Planning Commission, even if they're interesting. I think it'd be fine if the commission wanted to hear more about those ideas. But I think in terms of like an actual resolution where, related to the core of what the commission's roles and authorities are, I think it's helpful to have, the commission's recommendation on looking at inclusionary housing, inclusionary zoning, and related matters specifically.
Commissioner Moore?
Thank you.
Thank you. And please forgive the background noise. My partner and I work in the same space. As a new commission member, I fully support this resolution and would be open and willing to vote on it today. Thank you.
Commissioner Kantner?
Thank you. Sorry, just one more question. Director Pereira, could you speak a little bit to if there is capacity or if you have some ideas to find capacity to complete this study or at least do some work on it in the near future? I know that staff is often at capacity already or often above, and I just worry about adding more to their plate. So yeah, if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Kanner, thanks for that question. The work program that I developed with my team, presented in February, assumed current levels of staff capacity, the current number of FTEs we have on the team, and not anything else. So I was trying to be realistic and not knowing, given the budget situation in the city, we do have a vacancy that we haven't been able to fill. I hope that we can fill that this year, but it's not a for sure thing sort of thing. That was the context within which I prepared that work program. I think I think it would be a challenge right now to commit the current staff, the current planning staff, to take this on as an additional item without for two reasons. One, just the actual staff, the number of people that could take this on, because everybody's already really busy on my team. But then also the budget aspect of it, with one of the sort of next key items to do was to engage a consultant to help us do a sort of market feasibility study to understand what some of the options could be for inclusionary zoning, and that wasn't included in the 2021 budget. So we'd have to find a source for that. Is essentially the challenge for 2021. That said, we're now in April. We're a different place than we were in January, or what I mean, even late last year, in terms of thinking about what opportunities are there for funding. I think there is we're mapping out what that might look like in terms of could we find a source, could we find additional staff support to do this work. We know it's important. We know it's important, at least initially, to the city council, as they talked about it in 2018 in a resolution they adopted. They talked about it, when Director Goodman gave a presentation about anti-displacement, and then you all are talking about it as well, and have been. So we know it's important, and so I think that's informed, sort of how we circle back to this project and find ways to make it work, even given limited staff resources. So as it sits today, yes, I have concerns about staff and budget. That said, let's try to find a way forward on both of those fronts.
And I will just add to that question, Commissioner Kantner. Again, just to clarify, even if this resolution is more as a signal that this is a priority to the commission than it is a require. There wouldn't be a way for the commission to set a timeline on it and require staff to complete this. It's my understanding of it. So in other words, it's more of a. Let me phrase it like this. I've been sitting in the commission since about 2017, and this would be the first time that I have sat on a resolution in which the commission is proposing a resolution outside of a formal staff recommendation. This would be the body speaking for itself that this is a priority. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's that it will get done. Any additional questions? Commissioner Holst?
I think this is made clear, but I just want to really hear it. So this means that whatever's in the work plan now, we're saying by adopting this resolution, that doesn't mean something else is going to get kicked. In other words, we're not playing a zero-sum game on this at this point, that this would maybe go in the queue or not get done, but something else that we've already got listed doesn't somehow get kicked.
Yeah, the way I understand it, and Director Pereira and Mr. Warner can correct me on it, but the way I understand it is that's essentially what happens. It gets put on the queue, but it gets like a little asterisk that says it's a priority for the commission. With that said, I do think the fact that we vote on it and pass it, that in and of itself carries a message. So it does carry that additional weight to it. So
Thank you. That answers my question.
And like I said, because it was sent out yesterday, and just the general feeling of it, if the thought is to wait until the next planning commission meeting, we could address it then. And ultimately, I think I'm asking the steering committee members, the two that are remaining, whether they feel comfortable bringing the motion or what they would want to wait. Or
This is Commissioner Grill. Did Commissioner Baker have to leave?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Baker left us about an hour ago.
I'll make the motion and we can just see where folks are standing at, just because I know it's 10 o'clock and a lot of people might be jumping out soon. So I would like to make a motion for the Planning Commission to recommend the initiation of an inclusion zoning study and request that the City of St. Paul dedicate staff resources and identify and prioritize any available funding sources for the study, as well as consider other related zoning text amendments to the legislative code.
Thank you,
I
Commissioner Grill.
second
Go
the
ahead.
motion.
And who's that? I'm sorry.
Commissioner Moore.
Commissioner Moore. So we have a motion to adopt this resolution, seconded by Commissioner Moore. Is there any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Host? Commissioner Host?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. This is pretty fresh. It doesn't seem like staff or anyone's going to be able to do much between now and 2 weeks from now. You know, if a vote comes today, I'll definitely be supporting this. But the timing, you know, is just a little short on kind of when we saw it versus when we're voting on it. Again, in 2 weeks, I don't see that staff's going to get too far down the road on this anyways. I don't know if that, but I'd feel more comfortable if we were doing this 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, so I think the motion is on the floor. So is there, if anybody else would like to express whether they want to wait on it, perhaps it would be the time to say so now during discussion on the motion. And then, you know, we can have a discussion about whether Commissioner Grill can either decide to pull her motion or not, but Commissioner DeJoy?
Yes, since there is a motion on the table, we have to move forward, but I'm probably going to vote no for the same reason Commissioner Holst had explained, that 2 weeks to think of the bigger implications. And I'm mostly in favor of it, but I'm trying to figure out how that impacts the whole metro area instead of just isolating St. Paul. But anyway, I'm probably going to vote no, only to delay it for 2 weeks.
All right. Is there anybody else that would like to wait 2 weeks? Commissioner Taglia?
I would agree with that.
All right. And I see that also Commissioner Host.
I just, you know what, I think this is something we want to see passed, you know, with an overwhelming vote for this commission. So I guess I would request maybe that the motion is withdrawn because a later vote where we show what I'm guessing might be overwhelming support for this particular motion would be beneficial, right? I'd like to see a strong vote on this one, a strong yay vote. So,
Commissioner Hood.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, if we do delay it 2 weeks, would we be able to request from staff if they could give us a good and or reasonable timeline of when they would be able to, I know that obviously Director has spoken on this a bit, but when they might anticipate, roughly speaking, when a study, for example, might be able to be commissioned, and kind of get that down on paper so we can really have that as an agenda item and maybe go from there.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to answer that, Luis, and then you can add anything. It sounds like the completion of a study like this really does depend on finding the source to get a consultant to help with the completion of the study. And so a lot of it would be budgetary and you know, either city council or the mayor's office would need to appropriate that money for that. But what Director Pereira had commented on was that we could ask for a review hearing, either a 6 months or 1 year or 3 months review, and just have staff sort of come back and explain, like update us on, you know, whether any movement has been done on this particular resolution.
Okay, thank you very much.
So to Commissioner Grill, hearing the people that would like time that aren't necessarily objecting to the motion, they just want time to think about it some more. Would you still proceed forward with the motion, or would you ask to withdraw the motion?
I'm actually going to ask Mr. Warner if he's still here. If we have it on the floor and we have a second, do we have to continue or can I withdraw it at this point?
Chair, this is Luis. I do see Peter as being here, but I don't hear him.
Do you happen to remember if at this point I can withdraw it?
Procedurally, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, I just remember
sorry.
something from zoning where Peter, we had something going on and he was like, just take the vote. But that could be an old memory. See, saw comment.
Commissioner Tagia?
Could Commissioner Grill potentially amend her motion?
Yep, the friendly amendment would be probably the solution to this, Commissioner Tagia. Is there a friendly amendment you'd like to make?
I suppose my amendment would be that the motion is revised to read that we would lay over this item for 2 weeks or until the next planning commission meeting.
And then take a vote on the motion.
Right. So this is Commissioner Grill. I would accept the amendment to the motion. And then I guess I would look to my second to see if they're comfortable with that.
Yes, I'm comfortable with that amendment.
Director Pereira.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry to, Peter informs me his computer is not working or not cooperating, but he can hear but not be heard. He did say that you may withdraw the original motion at this point, and that might be what you were just talking about. Apologies.
So
okay, so now we have an amended motion with a second. I would like to withdraw my motion, the friendly amendment, etc.
All right. And I don't believe we need to take a vote if she's just asking to withdraw.
Chair, may I?
Go ahead, Mr. Host.
So I just quick Google guide Robert's Rules of Order. You can withdraw a motion with the permission of the second, it looks like. So I'm certainly willing to be corrected on that, but that looks like what's allowable.
Commissioner Moore.
Oh, so I second, just for clarification.
Yeah. Are you okay with withdrawing the motion as well?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So the motion is withdrawn for now. I do appreciate the commissioners that wanted to take time to think about it. You know, having just received it the night before, it is something to consider. And I do also agree with Commissioner Host that this is the type of, whether you vote for it or not, in favor or not, but if your inclination is to vote in favor, I do think it would be more of an impactful message if we have more individuals supporting it. Director Pereira and then Commissioner DeJoy.
Chair, thank you. And commissioners, I'm happy to report that via the chat here, I believe what you just did is procedurally correct. So just confirming that Commissioner Holst's understanding is right, that we've been advised to get the maker's opinion as well as the secondary maker's opinion, which I think happened just now. So thank you.
And then Commissioner DeJoy.
Yes, I was just going to make another motion, and that motion would be that this resolution be laid over for the next planning commission meeting from 2 weeks. I can't remember the date, but that we lay this over for 2 weeks.
All right. So that would mean that it would be put on the formal agenda. Is there a second for that motion?
This is Commissioner Grill. I will second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Sonia, can we get a roll call?
Okay. Commissioner Anderson? I can't hear. Okay. Commissioner DeJoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry? Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner?
Yes.
Commissioner Holt?
Yes.
Commissioner Yang?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia?
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Presley?
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
And one more time for Commissioner McMurtry? And the chair.
Yes. So
Unanimous. Yeah.
so that resolution will be laid over and be added to our agenda for 2 weeks from now. If you have any questions about the resolution or I hope Louise will be able to send out to the new commissioners the item list of what the staff will be working on in the upcoming year or for the rest of the year, and have those questions answered. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Comprehensive and Planning Committee. Commissioner Grill.
All right, this is Commissioner Grill. So the first item on the agenda is the District 12 Plan Update Draft Review. So in late March, the Comprehensive Neighborhood Planning Committee had the District 12 plan come to us, and it is coming back it's coming to the full Planning Commission for adoption of the St. Anthony Park Community Plan to the mayor and city council. So sending it along to the mayor and city council.
Okay. Are we getting a presentation at all, or are we just taking a vote on it?
I don't believe that there is a presentation today. I don't know if Anton, if you're on, if you have a comment on that.
Chair and Planning Commission, no presentation today. I think I gave one before the public hearing, but there's very minimal updates just in response to the District 12 letter that was part of the packet. And the motion is a resolution to approve the plan and send it on to Planning Commission and City Council for approval.
All right, so the motion coming from Commissioner Grill is to recommend adoption and to forward to City Council. Is there a second on the motion?
This is Commissioner Risberg.
Commissioner
I'll
DeJoy,
second
second.
that. Oh,
I think Commissioner Risberg beat Commissioner DeJoy to the second, so made by Commissioner Grill, seconded by Commissioner Risberg. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Tagia?
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner?
Yes.
Commissioner Perryman?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson? She gone. I see her, but I can't hear her. Okay. Commissioner McMurtry? Commissioner Holtz?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Yang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeJoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
Commissioner Grill?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Presley?
Yes.
Commissioner Hood? And Chair?
Yes.
Unanimous.
So that motion does pass to approve recommendation of the District 12 plan. Commissioner Grill?
It's Commissioner Grill. Thank you all for bearing with that one. I was trying to get through it quickly while we still had enough folks for a quorum. I was watching people drop off the call pretty quickly. And so the next item was going to be the zoning text amendments for EV electrical vehicle charging station sponsorship signs. After a robust conversation on this topic in the CNPC committee, we are going to lay this over and pick it up in an additional meeting, potentially in the coming weeks, potentially in May. So this item is no longer up for a vote today.
Okay, so we'll bring that back when it's ready to be voted on. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, Transportation Committee, Commissioner Risberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everybody. The Transportation Committee will be meeting again this coming Monday at 4:30. This Monday, we'll be talking about the Capital City Bikeway Interim Design Study and making a recommendation, reviewing a recommendation to approve the bikeway improvements, which basically is in the downtown area around Wabasha Street, 10th, St. Peter, and 12th. And should be an interesting discussion. And that would conclude my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Risberg. Communications and nominations, I'll turn to Director Pereira.
Hi, Chair. I believe our communications nominations chair may have left. We don't have any update, but there could be some updates in the near future. We've been a couple of things come up. We have been talking with District Council Coordinator Kat Beltman about trying to partner on a sort of a community workshop on planning and zoning. So in partnership with DSI, we're going to be talking about that in the near future. And that committee is one that's helped us in the past on such workshops. So more to come.
Thank you, Luis. And then Task Force Liaison Report, I'll turn over to Commissioner DeJoy first.
Okay, so on the Hillcrest Master Planning, we meet again on April 20th. That's next Tuesday. There's still time to take the survey by going to the St. Paul website. I didn't put it in the chat because I'm on my phone. It was difficult to maneuver that. But anyway, you could look that up online on the St. Paul's website, and there's still time to take the survey, or you can add comments in the ideas board. So that's my report. We got a full presentation at the last board meeting, so I hope everybody feels that they're up to date on where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner DeJoy. Commissioner Grill.
So for the Riverview Task Force update, the first Riverview Station Area Planning Task Force update. The first meeting of the Station Area Planning Task Force will be on May 4th. Information on that meeting can be found on the county's website. And I think it'll be sort of an organizational meeting. The members were named over the course of the last month, and we will be sort of getting together and organizing for that first meeting. And then they will be meeting roughly every 3 months for the next 3 years. So I would assume at one of our meetings in May, I'll have a more complete update.
Thank you, Commissioner Grow. So old business, and then new business, or any items that commissioners would like to add to the agenda for the next meeting. Seeing none, that will conclude the April 16, 2021 St. Paul Planning Commission meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and discussion, and thank you for considering and laying over the resolution for 2 weeks so that we all have an opportunity to really review it. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact staff. I'm sure they'll be more than willing to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.